Hello, and welcome to Theology on Tap. Today I want to share with you some pictures and photos of South Korea back in the 60s and early 70s, because that's the Korea I remember. Not how it is today, but back when everything seemed to be a lot more innocent, even though a lot of the people back then were going through a very difficult time. It hasn't been that long since the Korean War ended, and a lot of people were suffering. But for me, being a young person, a little kid back in the 60s and 70s, all I remember are just great, fun memories. So I just want to share that with you. I hope you enjoy this video. And of course, I want to start out with some alcoholic beverages. Obviously, I was too young to have any of these, even though my grandfather used to make his own wine and he would allow me to taste it from time to time. The little tower in the center, in the back there, that was one of the biggest attraction in South Korea. I remember going up there a couple of times. This is the cable car that I believe you take this up to go to that tower. And I remember going on that a couple of times. There's some pictures of some historic buildings. So there were quite a bit of traffic circles. At least back then. I don't know how it is right now. And as I'm sharing these pictures, I mean, I haven't read up on any of these historic buildings, so I don't know what they are. But I know they're famous. And I remember this area, I used to drive by here a lot. I think this is the way that we took to go to our house. I'm sure my dad and my brother would tell me I'm wrong. And I know this is a very famous landmark in South Korea. I have no idea what it is and what it was supposed to do, but I do believe this was on one of the coins, but I could be wrong. Now, one thing I do remember about growing up there is that during the 60s and early 70s, a lot of construction work going on in South Korea. And the biggest construction work that was going on at the time was subway. And I do remember this building. I think this was a government building. This is one of the main streets in Seoul. I remember this street very well. Here's one of the main streets in Seoul as well. And I do believe that building on the left is a government building. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but that's how I remember. And if it is a government building, that was where my father worked. Ah, look at that. Great picture. Now, this crosswalk bridge everywhere in South Korea. So I think that's one of the reasons why back then, especially, I don't remember watching anybody overweight in South, because you had to walk all the time, everywhere, and you had to go up and down these steps a lot. Now that building right there in the center, I believe that was the tallest building in South Korea back when I was living there. And if I could remember correctly, that building was only about 32 to 35 stories high. Imagine that. And then I hear stories like you go to United States of America, there are buildings that are over 100 stories high, and I thought that was just a fake story. Now that building on the left with the dome on the top, I don't know what that building was about, but I think at the time there were certain things you could do for the kids. You go up there and play games. I remember going in there a couple of times, and this is what it looked like. And this was part of that tower, that one of the very first pictures I showed you. And this is the walkway that you use to go to the top. A lot of walking in Korea. And then I come to United States and move to Los Angeles, find out nobody walks in LA. Quite the opposite. This I remember quite well. This is the train station in Seoul. I had to go there quite a bit to get on the train to go see my grandparents. It's a great looking building, isn't it? This one really gives me the chills because, man, I remember it. I remember this quite well. Walking right by there. Look at all those people. This was a famous building. I forgot what it was called. Like Johnny Walker or something. I don't know, I forgot. It had a foreign name, that's for sure. That's the statue of General Lee, I believe. Is probably the greatest general that has ever lived anywhere. And I don't know why they haven't made a movie about him in the States. They should make a movie about him, because I don't think he ever lost a battle. Once again, you gotta walk a lot in South Korea. Man, I think it just brings back so much memories. I remember driving by this few times. That billboard, it lights up at night. Mi1, that's MSG. Lot of MSG in Korean dish. Although nowadays they say they don't use it anymore, but I don't believe it. Nightlife, one of the shopping centers. Those taxis. You know, traffic in South Korea was really bad. And you get on one of these taxis going everywhere. Oh, there's a baseball stadium. I remember one time, my family, I think we went to see a game there in that stadium. And we were sitting in the press box area. And one of the security guards of the police thought that we snuck in, and my brother got beat up a little bit. Oh, those taxis. You know, there are accidents in South Korea all the time. So many cars, so many people. I know my brother got hit by a car one time. And it's a wonder how anybody survived. You know, those taxis, some of them would have a different color or some kind of a sign on it saying that this car has never been in an accident. Because it was so rare. Taxis are one thing, but buses, that's what I remember a lot about. So many buses everywhere. Look at those buses. You go everywhere riding those. Man, they look so old now. And those ladies that work on these buses, the bravest people in the world. Because when you go on these buses sometimes, especially during work, when you have to go to work or off, whatnot, there's so many people in a bus that you could barely fit. And these ladies would literally push you in, and they would just hang on to the bus as it drives off. That the ladies wouldn't even have a chance to get inside the bus. Dangerous job. People getting in and out of the bus. Now, I added this one because number 95, for some reason, I remember that number. So I'm thinking I've been inside of that bus. And these students, the uniform they wore. So I think that uniform says they're either in middle school or high school. I'm thinking more like a high school. Now these are middle school students getting inside of a bus. Now if you want to go somewhere from, let's say, from Seoul to Incheon or Busan, which is farther away, you get on these kind of buses. And I would think that these were the best, most luxurious thing you could ride on. But a lot of times I would get sick and throw up at the end of the ride because every person, I promise you, everybody smokes in these buses. I think that guy on the left, I think he's taking a leak. That happened a lot in South Korea too. And these three-wheel cars too, they were everywhere from what I remember. I don't know, you want to call them trucks? Three-wheeled trucks? Yeah, not very safe. And I added this photo because of that Jeep. My father worked for the government, so he had a driver that would drive us once in a while, and we were getting a Jeep just like that. Of course, a lot of the streets were not paved back then. Another shopping area. Look at all those signs. So messy, but so cool. So cool. Look at that. I could still read Korean, but I don't really understand too many of them. So I don't know what there was in it. There's one that says there's one area there I think is for students to go study after school is done. You know, Koreans, Asians are crazy about education. Even in the States, you know, a lot of Asians, they go to school from, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they gotta go to after school program things where they study even more. By the way, I didn't do that. I wasn't very much into education. Street vendors too, they were everywhere. And you know, thank God for these people. Back in the 60s and 70s, Korea was a third world country. And a lot of people were poor, starving. And these people would do anything to make a little buck, to just to live. God bless them. There's no way for people, young people today, to understand the pain and the sufferings. But that's a good thing. It is a good thing. Now I included this picture because I remember that gadget that she's wearing. That is to they used to carry water. The old Korean outfit. Now, for some reason, this picture really touched me a bit because for some reason, I saw myself walking in a small street like this, neighborhood street, holding onto my mother's hand, just going from one place to another. A lot of walking. Great memories. And do you see those little things on the right that with holes in it? They're coal. That you use that to warm up your house. Not many smiling faces, though. You have to wonder what it was like to go through being an adult at the time. Like I said, I was a kid, so all I remember is good, fun memories. But for adults who had to take care of a family one, I'm sure it was very difficult. I really like this picture of a mom carrying, please, her son on the back. And I know that's exactly how my mother used to carry me as well. I really like this picture too because, everything's kind of, I mean, it's kind of sad. I mean, it brings a lot of great fond memories, but, living at a time when it was so difficult, everything seems kind of grayish. Not many people smiling, but I really like that lady wearing red. She just stands out, makes everything look beautiful, doesn't it? I mean, I wonder what was she like going through life at the time. Like here's a big time stud. I wonder what life was like for him too. All the changes that was happening. He went through the war, survived, and I like this picture too because I think he could have been a big stud today, but back then, I don't know, he was probably poor. You see that little pull cart in front of him. He's probably working to make a little buck on the side, but he looks cool. All he needed to do for this picture was to put a cigarette in his mouth and he'll be like James Dean, right? A lot of things changed in the 70s. Out with the old and in with the new. All these guys trying to make a little buck on the side with those pull carts. I remember those pull carts well. And here's a guy just going up the hill. I remember going to church once or twice a week, and we had to climb a hill like this to get to our church. And during the winter time, when it gets slippery, it gets a little difficult. But imagine carrying something, or pulling a cart like this up that hill. And a lot of times, of course, the street that we lived on in South Korea too, it was not paved. It seemed very similar to this. And I put this picture in here because of that goat. Because I distinctly remember one time there was a guy who was walking around with a goat outside, and my mother bought the goat, and he brought a goat into our house, and literally I saw him take a machete and cut the goat's head off, drain the blood, and make a meal with the goat. And I remember that. So there were people who were walking around the streets of Korea with goats to try to sell them. I remember a bicycle with a bunch of things on the back like that too. Streets of South Korea. Yeah, a lot of the streets were not paved, and when it rained, it just messes up the whole street. And unlike Southern California, when it rains in South Korea during the rainy season, you're talking it rains 4, 5, 6 days in a row. Another picture of the shopping area. And there are tons of people walking and shopping all the time. Little tiny street with some restaurants. I think there's a motel back there. And there's a motel right there too. Wonder how much it is to stay a night in a place like that. Of course, it says hotel, and then there's whiskey. Koreans love whiskey. I personally like tequila much better. And these outdoor grocery stores, I remember them very well too. Once or twice a week, we would go and buy vegetables, and mostly vegetables and fish. Back when in the 60s and 70s, not much meat. And if you did have money to buy meat, I remember, you could chew that thing forever. The meat was not tender at all. One of the shopping centers in Korea, I remember going to places like this to shop. Ton of people all the time. Hey, finally see people smiling. This really brings a smile to my face. It's nice. They're selling silk, I think. That's nice. Again, this shopping area. Now I put this in there because I'm not 100% sure if this is the place that we would go as a family from time to time, but I think it is. Because I remember when this thing opened up, it was so exciting that we would go, and there would be literally like 100 people in the swimming pool, and you will see kids pissing into it and whatnot. I also remember because my brother almost drowned here at a swimming pool, but especially that water slide. That boy, I went on that quite a few times as a kid, and I thought that was the craziest, best ride ever. Now, I don't know if this is, I think this is the movie theater that I will go to from time to time. Brings back a lot of memories. See, I was like that little kid. A lot of people are having a hard time, but being a kid, even in the worst of times, being a kid is so good because you find things to laugh about as a kid. Waiting for the bus. And I put this picture in there because I remember having that too. It gets so cold, all you gotta do is put water outside in your yard or something and get on one of those. I don't even know what you call that. What do you want to call that? But it was fun. Just regular streets. You know, notice also the house had a lot of the walls are very high. You gotta build that wall, right? A lot of thieves back then, so you gotta protect yourselves. I think our house, we had a wall around our house, and from what I remember, I mean, I was just a kid, but I remember it being much higher than this. Much, much higher. Look at those kids. Hey, they must be my age by now, about 50 years old. Now, I want to conclude with this picture because more than anything else, this I remember the most because I would go watch this statue all the time when I visited my grandfather in Incheon. That is a statue of General MacArthur, who landed in Incheon and freed South Korea from the North Koreans and the Chinese and the Russians. And you know, there are a lot of superheroes and a lot of people have a lot of heroes, but for me personally, MacArthur by far is my hero, all-time hero. My grandfather and I would walk through here and he would tell me stories about the war, and yeah, it brings back a lot of great memories. You know, my kids will never understand, but hey, it just goes to show I lived, and South Korea was awesome. I mean, if I went to South Korea today, I probably won't like it because it's so different now. It's very much like United States, or even more glitzy. So I have no desire to go back because this is how I want to remember South Korea as. So as I end this, I want to give a special thanks to Neil Mishalov. I found these pictures on his Facebook. So if you want to see a lot more pictures of South Korea, even from the early 1900s, and I'll see you next time. God bless you.